Hello, in this tutorial I'm going to explain you how to integrate your custom APIs to your application. So we are going to integrate a very simple API with the Ricky Morty API. So we can read the information from here and show this information we get from the API to display this information in a simple application. The first step is open the API's dashboard. You can see this icon in the home screen and click on Create. Here you are going to name the API you are going to integrate. In this case, Rick and Morty. Rick and Morty API integration. Choose a category. For example, we are reading data and the role you have in relation to the API. For example, I don't have any relation with Rick and Morty. I'm going to upload an icon to identify the API. I can change all this information later. Click on Create. And the next step is go to definition. You can create public or private APIs. The public APIs needs to be approved to be public available. So for example, if you have a backend system and you want to create a public API so any user can create an application integrated with your platform, you can create a public API. Also, if you're going to integrate, for example, a payment gateway, and you would like to share your integration with another users, so you can select public API, and after the review, it's going to be public available. So I'm going to select the public API. Then we have the config inputs. The config inputs are the general values that you are going to ask to the user to integrate the API. For example, in this case, if we go to the docs to the API REST, we don't need any kind of authentication to use the API. But there are some APIs, for example, the Stripe API, which needs an authentication. So if you need this kind of authentication, you are going to ask for this authentication at the beginning. So you don't need to enter this data each time that you call to the API. For example, if you need an AP key and is required, you can add this AP key in this part, and you can use this later as a value in every call you make to the API. Okay, then we're going to the base definition. Well, this is not necessary to enter something here, so it's only if your API needs it. Then you have the base URL. This is usually the, well, you will have this on your documentation, is the base URL to all the API calls. Well, if you have worked with APIs before, you know that the base URL doesn't change while the end of the URL changes depending on the endpoint or what do you want to do. Well, to call the different endpoints. So I'm going to copy here the base URL and paste over here. So, and now we have different options to add to this base definition. This base definition is going to be repeated every call on the different endpoints. So for example, if I need to send an API key, or like something like here, like you need to send a header, or for example, if you need to send a header with the key or with the with the name API key, or with the name, ask the documentation. You can select the field you entered previously on the config inputs. So if I click in add, each time that I'm going to call the any endpoint, this key is sending with every call. So it's going to be repeated sending. So I don't need to enter this header on every endpoint. So this is basically the general configuration for the API. So if I need to send the headers, you need to send them here. And the URL is if you need to send variables on get. So send some APIs ask you to send variables on get, when you enter something like this, like key, like quote. Okay. So when you need to send this kind of variables, the key is entered here and the value over here. Is a variable, you can choose from the first part for the config inputs, or if it's a fixed value, you can enter here and click on add. Concatenated is if you need to add to the URL. For example, some APIs ask you to add something like this, ask you to add something at the end of the URL. So you can add this concatenated. So concatenated, the URL are the get variables, headers, body. If you need to send always, for example, a key in the body on the post calls, you will enter this information here. And finally, you have two options to automatically omit the parameters that are empty, or query parse the body request, for example, for forms. Okay, so you have all these options. For now, I'm not going to add anything, since this API I'm going to integrate doesn't need any authentication. The next step is the module categories. You can create different modules categories. For example, if you are integrating something like Stripe for products, so products is the category, and these all the endpoints. In this case, this simple API doesn't have a lot of categories, but I'm going to add the general category. For example, general category for Rick and Morty. And now I'm in on the general category, and I'm going to create a new module. For example, let's do something simple. For example, here with this endpoint, I'm going to get all the characters. Let's open this on the browser. You can see if I open this, I'm going to get all the characters. So I'm going to add this endpoint to my API declaration. So I'm going to name these characters. Get characters, and select the get. Okay, so here I'm going to add only the last part of the API. For example, the word character of the endpoint. it's not necessary to add from the beginning, since we already added this on the base definition. So I'm only adding character. It's not necessary the slash at the beginning or at the end. Here are some input fields that we can send, for example, count or pages. Here are the values that we can send to the request. For example, to limit the number of results we are getting, or well, it will depend totally of the well, no, this is the result. Let's forget our characters. There are single characters, there are multiple characters. Okay, these are the filters. So, for example, if I want to filter by status, so I'm going to add the status as a variable. We can send or not. The species. For example, the name. You can add as many as you need. Sometimes, well, it can be different kind of variables. Can be number, can be object, can be strings. So you can have all these parameters here. And the second is the request definition. It's basically the same you have here, but in this case is specifically for these endpoints. So, for example, if I want to, well, all these parameters in these documentations are sent by get, get variables to filter. So I'm going to send all these parameters in the URL. You see that I need to add the key again and choose what is the name of the variable I set here, because I can name different here. For example, instead of name, I can name as name to display in a better way for when I am using the API. You will see in a moment how you will see these labels. Doesn't matter. It's not important what is the name you set here, but the important is the key, because this key is exactly how you are going to call the endpoint. So I'm going to add the name, the species, and the status. Okay, that's all. And I'm going to enable the automatically omit parameters that are empty, so I don't need to enter all this filter, and it's going to call only the parameters I add on the filter. And finally, the outputs. As you can see here, they give you an example of the result you are getting when you call the API. The general output is called data. So if you add data as an object, you will see all the results in a data. For example, let's see. Here we have the test, the basic, the config inputs we have here. We can add the config inputs if we need it. I'm going to delete in a moment because it's not needed here. Then the input setup. This is for test the API call. Basically, if you have worked with Postman, this is almost the same. So I can click on test, and I'm going to get all the characters on this testing. Sometimes it takes a moment because this code is made on the server, since some APIs has restrictions if you call from a different domain. So you see, you have all the information here on data, but sometimes, for example, you need only the results and you don't need all this data. In this case, you can add, for example, results and data.results, since results are inside of data as an object. Doesn't matter if it's an array. Well, basically it's a kind of object. I'm going to download the first one. If you see, the difference here is that I'm getting only the results property. So it is useful if you need only a single property from all the API, but if you need everything, well, it's okay if you add only data and get all the results from the API call. Finally, you have the base input updater. This is almost for the different kind of authentication. Sometimes with the result of a call to an endpoint, for example, if you authenticate the user by sending some information, you get a token from this authentication, and you can update the parameter from the config inputs with a value from the output data. For example, if you set here as a result of the data, you are going to get a key or a token, you can update the config inputs after this call, so you can use in future calls to different endpoints. But for now, it's not important, so I'm not going to add anything. And that's all. If you have these results, you can, let's going to test one last time to see that everything is working okay. Yep. Now I have all the characters here. You see that I have the data, info, results, and as a result, I have an array with all this information here. So once it's okay and working, I'm going to create my first version. So I'm going to click on create first version, and now it's created with all my models. So it's in review because I choose to make this public, but doesn't matter. Well, it's not going to be public available, but I can use inside my application. Also, if you want to make this private, only change this and change the private, and you will see that it's published since it's only available for me. Okay, so that's all. That's basically how you create a new API. So now, how can we use this API inside our application? Okay, you have your application here. If you already start working on it, so you need to go to the settings, clicking here, and go to the add-ons and choose the category. In this case, I'm going to choose data, and you will see here your integration with this version. I'm going to enable. That's all. If I need to set some configurations, you can click here and add, for example, the API key if it's needed, and click on save. If you don't need to customize or add basic parameters for authentication, it's not needed to configure anything. Only enable the API. And you see that I have the version 2 installed, and the last is the version 2, because I can update the configuration of my API without change the API on some of the application I already using it. So I can continue working on my API separately from my app. So I'm going to click on edit, and let's see to display all this information I'm getting from the API. First, let's do something very basic. let's get all the information from the API in a alert. Okay, I'm going to drag and drop a button, and when I press this button, I'm going to call the API. You will see the APIs at the end, and you see I have the only endpoint I created. And you see we have here all the definitions that we set when we create the endpoint. So you can add here the parameters or get this information from the interface. For example, if I add a field and in the second tab, I change the field as a name, for example, character name. So you can use this information from the interface on the second tab for entry bars and read this information. So the user can add the name, click on the button. Let's change with double click to search, and filter the characters from the API with a specific name. And then these are the entry bars. Then these are the callbacks in case of error or success. If it is success call, I'm going to send an alert, and let's get all the information as a result from the characters. Okay, so I'm going to click on this button. Is going to call the API over here, read this parameter, and send us the information in an alert. I'm going to test the API here. Only be careful because some APIs don't allow to be called on the browser if are called from a different APIs, because they are going to give you an error for course. I don't know if this is the case. It's not the case. I have all this information here. It's the result of the call to the API. So it's okay. Yeah, I'm getting the information. So now let's try to display all this information in a list. There are some videos on our YouTube channel show you how to create a list in a more specific way. I'm going to create a very basic list with a container. Just a quick reminder, to create a list, you need a container where you are going to display the list, and then you need another container inside, which is going to be a single element of the list. I'm going to divide these second containers with the setting options. And well, let's see what we get when we have the results. We have the image, we have the location, the name, the status. Well, I'm going to display only a few of these properties. So I'm going to drag an image and some text. A text, for example, for the name. Another text for the, I don't know, for the species. And the last one for the handler. Okay, so yeah, that's enough. Yeah, you can have as many as you want and change the styles and the colors and the size. Well, it depends on what you want. Okay, now we have this container is going to be the list, this container inside for a single element. Okay, so it's what we need on design to show the list. Then on success, I'm going to call the add collections to UI. This function is to create the list. So I'm going to enter on the data, the information we get on the characters API. So I'm going to select from characters, from data, but as you remember, on data we don't have all the the results. We have the results inside the data. So data.result. Okay, so this property, because it's not is where we have all the lists with all the characters. It's important, needs to be, well, can be an array or an object, but if I send an object, I am getting only two elements, the info and the results. But as I am sending the results, I'm getting one row for every object on this array. Okay, so I'm sending from the characters, from the result of this API call, I'm reading the data, specifically the results. And then I have the options to create the list horizontal if I need, reverse if I want to start from the end, and scroll inverted if I want to start from the bottom to the top. Okay, but if I'm going to disable all of this, and then I can choose where I'm going to display the list, because you can have multiple lists from multiple APIs from database, for example, in the same page. So it's important to choose where I'm going to show this list. You have different options here. For example, you can categorize by tabs, for example, by species, and you will have the tabs available here. You can enable a filter directly on the list with all the data from the list to filter manually. And you have the placeholder, you have the order option, and also you have the option for columns. So you can display the data on different columns on the list. Okay. So for now, I'm going to use the default settings and click on list data. In this part, we're going to select where properties are going to be shown on each element on the page. For example, on this is the image control. So I'm going to change what property of this image. For example, I'm going to change the source image for this element, and I need to I can select what is the property, or what is the name of the property is going to be shown as the source for the image. I'm going to select this for the list context. In the list context, I have all the properties available for each result. In this case, I have all these properties available to have right here. And I have a property called image. So I'm going to add the name of the property here. We're on list context, and we're going to show the image property here in the name, and the other ones are similar, but it's important because you can select different kind of properties. For example, if I had a color or a property here, I can use one of these properties here. So in this case, I'm going to show the name, which is this property here, the species, which is the one here, and the handler, which is this one. Okay, so that's all. We can add also functions. This last step is to add functions. For example, when I click on a single element, we can send the user, for example, with navigation to another screen to see the detail of this character with more detail. Okay, I'm going to do it in a moment, just as an example. But at this point, when I click on this button, I can do it on load. For example, if I want to get all the data when the page loads, I can add this function on load. I'm going to do it in a moment. But for now, it's going to be updated when I click this button for search. So let's see. We have our application. If I click on search without add anything on the character name, I'm going to read all the characters and display all these characters on the lists. Okay, you see, we have all the characters from the API available here. If I search, for example, only for Rix, search, and you will see that it is filtering, since all this information, well, is basically on the documentation. So you can create a list. We are calling the get API and getting all this information to the application and showing this on the app. If I want to create two more examples to finish this video. If I want to create another page with the details of the characters, for example, let's see, I'm going to add a container with 100% 8, 100%, no, like 800% 8, and another container with 10% 8, 90%. I'm going to change the background for the top, a little bit the background for this one, and a small container over here with an icon for back, and align this to the left. Okay, so I'm going to add this to on-press. There are another videos, and also follow us. We're uploading more tutorials how to create different kind of applications, and also webinars where you can ask everything. So I'm going to return to the last screen with a certain animation, and so I'm going to be on this page with for example, with the image, and I can add more text here with the detail of the characters. Yeah? I can add as many fields as I want, but it's only a simple example. And I can send the information between these two pages. For example, I'm going to call this character data. Okay. So with this information, with the page input data, this variable is going to be sent from the other page. When I click on this page with a single character, this information is going to be sent to this variable, and I can modify the elements on this page based on this information we get. So let's see an example. When I click on search, modify elements, if I click on a single element on the list, I'm going to push screen to the page 1, and you see that I have the variable available here. I'm going to send all the information from this item to the other page. I'm going to select basic transition. So when I click on this search, I'm going to create a list, and when I click on a single element of the list, I'm going to open the other page and send all the context information to the second page. Okay, and now we're on this page. I'm going to add an event on load to modify some controls on the interface. This function for modify control allow me to modify every element or every control on the screen. So I'm going to use the information from the base data, specifically for the character data, specifically for the property called image. Yep, that one. And I'm going to modify the image and change the source. You see, it's very similar that when you create the list, but in this case, I'm using the function to modify a single element. I can copy and paste this function, and I'm going to do the same, but for the name. And you see, I have only this element, the text area, because I didn't change the name over here, but I can change the name here. For example, name. It's not necessary, but age, no? But if you can change it, well, it's easy because you can identify better the elements, no? You can see that is now the name, and the last one is the I think it's nothing. Well, the handler. Well, let's choose another different, the status. Okay, so the status, and well, his name age, but this doesn't be important. I'm going to change in a moment. I change the text. Okay, I'm going to change this for the status. It's not important. It's only for internal reference. But when I change it, you will see it change is the name of the control. So now let's test this new option. Click on search. Now I have list. If I want to go to the detail, click on this, and you see that I have the detail here. Click on here. I have the detail. Well, basically, all this information is from the API we are calling. So, well, this is tutorial. We're improving the tutorials to make more specific for each function. But what I'm going to show you on this tutorial is basically how we can create an API, the calls, the variables, how we can use this API inside of our application, and display the information, navigation. There are many functions you can learn over the application, and we're improving a lot, especially in English, because we have a lot of documentation in Spanish, but give us some days, and we're uploading constantly tutorials how you can create different things on the application. Also, if you need help, you can send us a message on the chat we have available here. And for specific things, we don't give you we can create complex. We can't create for you complex logics, but if you give us some information what you want to create, we can help you creating some videos explain you how you can create some parts on some logics specific for your application, and all the feedback is welcome. So thank you. You see this tutorial, and I hope you follow us on our YouTube channel. If you search for Apphive NoCode, you will see the tutorial on YouTube. This channel for the Apphive NoCode is a channel in English, so you will see many information here. We have charts, we have some tutorials. I started to create, for example, an application for delivery. We have a tutorial for each element with information how this element works. So, and we are uploading constantly new tutorials, and especially now that we are launching the community on English. Also, you can visit us on the community.apphive.io, and you can ask anything you want, and we can help you with the information you need to create a great application. Thank you, and see you.